Hey, welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harrison. Thank you for joining us again. I am in the midst of fasting for preseason surgery, so I'm very cranky. And I am joined by Cam Real. Cam, are you cranky?
Not really, but I can't be for you, Rich. Is that the vibe today? Is this a
What's
spite
that?
podcast? Is this a
What?
spite podcast today?
Well, the first thing you said to me, or the last thing you said to me via text was you were going to be a few minutes late because you were eating lunch. And I'm like, you fucker.
Had to be done.
And,
Had to
and
be done,
the
Rich.
last thing I did before I came to this room where I record was my wife was in the kitchen making lunch. And I'm like, what is this? Do that in secret or I can't see you.
Yeah, not a bad plan. It's just
Yeah.
common courtesy, really.
Yes. So we may be joined by Drew. He's been very busy. I don't know. So somehow I think he got roped into doing baseball where he's supposed to be basketball and track. And I think they have him doing baseball and probably track too. They don't pay him enough because basically any time someone's out or they need extra help, it's his
He's covering.
job. And so he ends up covering for the whole university. And we also may be joined by Doc later too for the NBA portion. This week, because I am going into surgery, has been kind of crazy. We've had to move the date of the show several times. But anyway, we'll move on to the college notebook. I don't know if you know, but I don't think there's been any big coaching changes. I think that's all settled down, though it is interesting, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, of how certain guys are doing very well, new guys at their place. And some of the more established guys who have moved aren't doing so well. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we'll jump right into the portal. And now, are you ready for this? We're very close to 1,900 players in the portal. Another close to 1,000 D2 players are in there. We don't track a ton of D2 players, but we do, track the best of the best. And some of them are moving up to D1. Not going to talk about them, but I'm just saying it happens. And the portal will close in a few days, May 1. So we're almost done. Now, that doesn't mean portal activity will be over. It just means you can't put your name in, which to me is kind of odd. There should be I hope there's a special circumstance rule, like your mother gets sick and you want to be closer to home, or your coach suddenly leaves for some reason, still should have some kind of window for guys with really special circumstances. But so the top guys that are out there, some of them are new. Dylan Mitchell, we still have number one. DJ Wagner is still available. Wooga Poplar put his name in recently. Ugana Unyenso put his name in recently. Rounding out our top 10, Janelle Davis, Baba Miller, Florida State, Cliff Amore, Rutgers, still available. I'm surprised. Garway Dual, Providence is still out there. Norchad O'Meara added his name recently. And what's interesting about that is he said he was going in the draft and not returning. Well, apparently that's why I always take those not returning statements, with a grain of salt, because obviously if his name is a portal, there's a good chance he's going to return. So any comments about, Jackson Robinson, he's 15th on our available list. He was a recent addition, and what was interesting about that was two other key players on BYU were in the portal, and they came back on the same day. They said, all right, we're staying at BYU. So, they got a salary increase. And then the next day, Jackson Robinson not only puts his name in the portal, but also puts his name in the draft. And it seems to me one of those situations, oh, you're going to pay them that? What about me? And So yeah, we'll see if BYU ponies up for Jackson Robinson as well. I would think BYU has a lot of funds available. I could be wrong, but AJ Hogarth, um, a 4-year guy at Michigan State, still has 1 year left. He put his name in recently. So Chaz Lanier, I think we mentioned him before. But he's number 20th on our list, and he was supposed to be on the show, but haven't been able to make recent contact with him. So he's a really interesting prospect from North Florida. He's also in the draft. Very athletic, and I assume he's probably going to go to an established D1 player. He was basically way too talented for North Florida, basically. So it'd be interesting. He has 1 year left. If he doesn't stay in the draft, be interesting to see where he lands. Any comments on these 2,900 players that are in the portal?
I mean, it's getting ridiculous. I mean, I'd love to know what percentage of D1 is currently in the portal. It's a big percentage.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would
there's-
think. Well, all you have to do is multiply. Let's see. Go ahead, continue talking, and I'll give you a rough estimation.
I just think it's getting silly. I think it makes it really hard to, really kind of stick with one team, and coaching changes are going to, I mean, especially impact or have impacted, where a lot of these transfers are going, which is part of why we kind of needed it in the first place. Like,
yeah,
the old system of, making guys wait a year every year if they wanted to transfer was ridiculous. But I don't know if this is really a long-term solution either. Maybe during COVID, it made a little bit more sense to kind of expedite everything, but the fact that anybody can kind of just throw their name in and then take themselves out with, relatively little or no penalty is just extreme.
Well, I think right now players use it as a tool. I've seen not a ton, but I've seen probably at least 20 guys who, important guys, not, I'm not tracking every player. But I've seen, about 20 guys who put their name in and then come back to their school. And you can only assume they got the raise, they do it for money. Can we blame them? No. We'll talk with this with our guest, James Jones, coach of Yale, but I think we somehow have to keep college. I don't mind the players getting paid, but I don't like AJ Storr, in negotiations with Kansas. He wants $1 million and they offer him 750,000. I don't know what the number ended up being, but he ended up going to Kansas. So, but those are incredible numbers for a college player. That's more than G League guys are making,
Yeah.
So maybe we discuss that down the line, what the solution is. But yeah. So in terms of who's committed, that's what I did this week. That's kind of where my focus was. And I organized the top guys who have signed by team. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of go down at who's doing well and maybe even comment about who's not doing so well. But as we look down this list, and please look with me, I think the first team that probably stands out to me is, Grand Canyon. They are, Bryce Drew is still bringing in big-time players. Of course, Dennis Evans was a 5-star guy who didn't play much for Louisville, and then got hurt. They shut him down while he transferred to Grand Canyon. They also got, Jacoby Coles, who's for that level of play at the WAC. Jacoby Coles will be a star. Good rebounder, can make an outside shot. good interior scorer. Is he a pro? Not an NBA pro for sure, but at Grand Canyon, he's going to be a really, really good player. Illinois, I think, is one of the teams that has really, really knocked the door down. Now they're going to be losing their best player, Terrence Shannon, because he's out of eligibility, and Coleman Hawkins just declared for the draft. But and they also lost Dane Danger. He transferred to Memphis, but they bring in Keelan Boswell from Illinois, probably the best point guard that was in the portal, and still only 19 years old. I mean, I'm saying best in terms of potential. He's not the best. You know what I mean? But they also bring Ben Humericius in from Evansville. Really underrated guy. Trey White was a former 4-star. He comes in from Louisville. Carrie Booth was like a top 50 recruit that left Notre Dame to go to Illinois. So yeah, Illinois started to knock it out of the park. But I think one team to see doing even better is Indiana, because they brought last show we talked about them bringing in Miles Rice, but since then they brought in Keenan Carlisle, a very dynamic scoring guard from Stanford, and they also bring in Omar Ballo, Luke Goody, a sharpshooter from Illinois, and then we have Kansas. We knew they added AJ Storr, but then on top of it, they bring in Rylan Griffith, a 3-and-D guy, and Riley Kugel, who some people were calling a first-round pick at the start of this season. He had a disastrous season in Florida that culminated with him, coming off the bench and not seeing a lot of action in a lot of games. This guy's very talented and still only 20 years old. They also bring in Zeke Mayo from South Dakota State. Yeah. So now these guys, interestingly, are all guards, no bigs. So Kansas will still have Hunter Dickinson, who just said he's coming back. They'll still have KJ Adams. Juan Harris is coming back. El Marco Jackson, the high-level point guard who played was his backup, comes back. And I think Johnny Furphy's coming back. By the way, have you seen Furphy play much?
I've seen a little bit of him, yeah.
ESPN, I believe. Now, I haven't looked at anybody's big board lately, but I've just kind of heard that they have him ranked like a top 25 player. Are you kidding me? Johnny Furphy?
Look, in the upcoming class?
No, in this draft. They have him as a first
round. The current draft.
Huh?
That's insane.
That's insane. Johnny Furphy does one thing. He shoots. Yeah, he's pretty athletic, but, my God, Johnny Furphy, if Johnny Furphy is a first-round pick, this draft is in real trouble.
Yeah, the talking head aspect of the draft is going to get weird this year. I mean, it's kind of a free-for-all draft, and we're going to see some atrocious takes, and that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider. I mean, obviously, we still haven't filtered out everybody, and yesterday was the last day to declare for early entries, but we don't know who's staying and who's going. They're going to go through the combines and all that process, so we don't know who the final ones are. But right now, I have Furphy on an unfiltered list at 124, undraftable right now. And I think I'm even being generous there, just going on his potential, not so much what he did on the court. So up to Kansas. You have any comments about how these teams have changed?
Well, I think Kansas is pretty well shaped to make a Final Four run this coming year based on the guys that they brought in. Granted, Furphy's not an NBA prospect right now in our minds, but he's a hell of a college player, for sure. Especially given the talent that should be. But given the talent that they have, I mean, he's a shooter. He's going to really fit in well with the guys that they've brought in, and the guys that they've maintained. That's going to be a hell of a team. Those are the guys that really, I mean, that's the team that stands out to me, just so far that we've talked about.
Right. I
Another team
agree.
that kind of, I think we did really well, they brought in fewer transfers, but I really like what Ohio State did, bringing in Aaron Bradshaw, and they also got Michi Johnson from South Carolina. It's a nice, guard big combo to kind of add into a team that was, solid in the Big Ten. They weren't going to blow you away, but um, that's a really nice, just kind of around the edges addition. Um, Also saw that our boy Ravi Avila did not, make his way to a beach town. He's going to go to St. Louis.
Following his coach
Yeah.
and also teammate Isaiah Swoop, who's a little three-point shooter, kind of like Max A. Smith kind of guy. He followed the coach too, but I thought maybe all 5 guys would go to St. Louis, but they haven't. Some of them have decided to go to bigger programs. Of the 5 starters, 2 went to Texas and another went to Xavier, and then Avilia and Swoop went to St. Louis. And that is the weirdest move, by the way. I still don't understand why you go from Indiana State to St. Louis. You know, I know St. Louis has a nice history. I don't know if it's any better than Indiana State's, and I don't know if the A10 is that much better than the Missouri Valley. Though I would say Missouri Valley still is a 1-bid conference, unfortunately, though I think they were moving in the direction of being a 2-bid conference. The A10 almost always gets a couple of bids, at least. So maybe that's why. Maybe he's trying to enhance, and money, I'm sure, played a role. We're talking about Josh Schertz, last year's head coach of Indiana State, now at St. Louis. One of the things I found interesting was Kentucky's doing better than Arkansas. Right now, Ivicic is the only Kentucky player to follow Calipari to Arkansas. Everyone pretty much who was a decent player at Arkansas last year is leaving. So cupboard's pretty bare at Arkansas right now. Meanwhile, Kentucky is getting just announced recently. All these guys committed recently was Otega Owa from Oklahoma, a really athletic wing shooting guard who I think has NBA upside. He certainly has the athleticism and size. Then they have Amari Williams, the big-time shot blocker from Drexel, who we've had on the show. And then they bring Lamont Butler from San Diego State, who's just a lockdown, tenacious defender.
Yeah.
Now, again, a lot of Kentucky guys are in the portal or have declared for the draft. But right now, Kentucky still seems to be, winning. Mark Pope is kind of beating Calipari. So the Kentucky name seems more important than the Calipari name. You think that's going to hold?
I actually do. I think, I think it's still a little early, really, even to look at kind of the recruiting changes that we're going to see, following this coaching change. But I think Kentucky's gonna. We talked about this last pod. I think the Kentucky brand is gonna really come through for Mark Pope. Just given the fact that coming from BYU, now he has this this huge fan base, huge donor base, huge NIL base to work with. And on top of that, he's a pretty good coach. I think this trend's gonna continue. I think you can kind of look down, whenever Calipari has made a move, he kind of goes back to his roots of like just kind of a scrappy, guy, a team filled with guys that, other teams didn't necessarily want. And then over time kind of builds up, some steam and recruiting, but we'll see. I don't have high expectations for him in Arkansas. It's a big change. But I think you would definitely hope to see a little bit more progress in the transfer market for Calipari. I mean, especially given that Arkansas is not exactly like a bare cupboard to begin with. But we'll see. I like what Kentucky's done so far, for sure.
Yeah. And their cross-state rivals have even done better. That's Pat Kelsey coming from Charleston. He's brought in, none of these guys are household names or All-Americans, but he's brought in 6 really good college players. Chucky Hepburn, Javon Hadley from Colorado, Akbar Abubakara, Traore from Long Beach State, Ali Khalifa from BYU, Terrence Edwards from James Madison, Corin Johnson from Washington. All these guys are really good players. So Louisville is even doing better than Kentucky right now. Memphis, Memphis always brings in a bunch of players. They recently got Tyrese Hunter. They also got PJ Haggerty, who was unbelievable little scoring guard for Tulsa last year. I think he averaged close to, I think it was close to 25 points per game. And of course, the aforementioned Dane Danger. Michigan just recently got Roddy Gale from Ohio State. That one had to hurt. Roddy Gale going from Ohio State to Michigan, and also Danny Wolf from Yale. Now again, when we spoke to James Jones, it was about a week ago, and I spoke to him just the same day we did our last show, so we didn't have a chance to get it up, and so we're going to do that today. At the time, he thought Danny Wolf might come back, but and you would think Yale would be able to throw a lot of money around. I'm not just sure how that. The Ivy League does so many things differently, and I wonder if the money situation. They can't really throw, or they won't throw the NIL there, but you would think donors from Yale should have plenty of deep pockets there. Also, Michigan brings in Sam Walters, sharpshooter from Alabama, and Trey Donaldson from Auburn. So Michigan is trying to rebuild and off to a great start. Let's see, as we move down the list, Providence is making some moves. They're looking to be good next year. I'm not going to go through every one of these. UCLA is another team. Quietly, a lot of their guys are returning. And, of course, they had a really disappointing season, but the team was filled with freshmen and sophomores. So now they're adding Kobe Johnson from USC, Eric Daly was a 4-star from Oklahoma State. William Kyle is a very athletic power forward from South Dakota State. And Sky Clark from Louisville, who's another former 4-star. And so UCLA is a team to watch for. Vanderbilt with James Madison's coach, and his name escapes me, but I'll tell you in a minute. Mark Byington is Vanderbilt has brought in, again, not household names, but a bunch of good players. And that situation is looking promising. But the other team I want to talk about is Eric Musselman's USC. And now we know Musselman has this reputation. He and Alabama both seem to, when a guy's name is in the portal, they seem to be after everybody. There seems to be no discrimination. You understand? It's just, if a guy's out there, they go for him, and they will figure it out later. Well, I think that totally backfired on Musselman last year, because he had a bunch of, I would say, above average players, and nobody stood out. And so he ended up tinkering with his lineup forever, and could never settle on it. Wasn't until like maybe the last couple of weeks of the season when he finally seemed to figure it out. But by then it was way too late. He seems to be making the same mistake this year. I'm going to tell you who he brought in. He brought in Chibuzu Agbo from Boise State, really good shooting wing, and also has, upside on the defensive end. St. Thomas, who we interviewed on this show, who's a versatile wing, mainly scores in the inside, had dominating numbers at the Big Sky level. Josh Cohen, not very athletic, a center, brings him in from Massachusetts. Josh Cohen was highly efficient in the interior at UMass, but not very athletic. And then he brings in Matt Noling from Yale. And Matt, I think, was player of the year in the Ivy League, not last year, but 2 years ago. Last year, he dealt with a lot of injuries. He's kind of an undersized power forward. But here's my thing. Agbo coming in from Boise State, I think he will transition fine. But I worry about these other three guys who were very, very productive at significantly weaker conferences.
Mhm.
I think St. Thomas will be okay, but I think he's going to have to change his game. Cohen, like I said, good college player, but just doesn't have the athleticism. And Matt Noling, really is coming off he's obviously Yale player, smart player, but he's really coming off a kind of a dismal, disappointing year. I just think, all these guys coming in from lower conferences, and Musselman hasn't been able to land one transfer from a Power 6 conference. We're going to be down to Power next year. We'll use Power 5, but we'll still use Power 6 for right now. I think this is a huge mistake, or maybe that's all he can get. But I'm telling you, USC is the cupboard's bare. Everybody's left pretty much.
Yeah.
So this is who he's going to go to battle with. And they're moving to the Big Ten. I mean, look at these guys. Can you see them, matching up with the rest of the Big Ten?
I can't. Well, and two, I think, everybody's kind of sharpening their swords for this coming Big Ten season. Same with the SEC season that's coming up. There's a lot of teams, a lot of schools that have moved conferences. We're going to have our first sort of look at what, super conference NCAA is going to look like. And it's going to be a brutal war in a lot of these conferences, new rivalries, all that. And, you want to enter that sort of fight with the most that you can. And it's going to be a rough year to be a first year coach with a new program, and I think especially too, coming from Arkansas, I think you would imagine there are some guys that he could have, brought along with him. I think that's the same thing that we kind of expected with Calipari going to Arkansas, and that didn't work out either. So, I don't know. I think this is kind of the risk that you have to take, starting fresh with a new program, and Musselman will be fine. He's a good recruiter. He'll, surely he can take advantage of the recruiting benefits that USC has, being in LA, but it's going to take a little bit to really build up this program.
Yeah. And St. Thomas, I should say, he was on the show, and I really took a liking to him. And it's just, you worry, I think for every story, Dalton Connect-like story, of guys coming out of like the Big Sky or the Big West or the Summit League, there was a lot of failure. So I'm not saying that St. Thomas is going to fail. I'm just saying that the odds are that he is not going to be the same kind of star, at the Big Ten. I hope I'm wrong, and he's still relatively young. He was only a junior this year. He's 21. But we're talking about a guy who, with the exception of Dylan Jones, who maybe was arguably, a top 5 most productive player in the country in terms of all around stats. You would have probably heard a lot more about, St. Thomas, because he was doing the same thing in the same conference, but just Dylan Jones. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's going to most likely be drafted this year. And yeah, so good on you, St. Thomas. I hope everything works out well, but it's just, odds, statistically, odds are against them. So, all right, we'll move on. So those are some of the teams that are doing well in the portal and some of the teams that are not. And so now we'll talk about the early entries in the draft. And as I said, yesterday was the deadline. And we now have a good idea of who all the early entries out. And of course, they can pull out later on. It's sometime in late May, right after the combines. So a good number of these guys, I would think, are going to return to school, probably the majority of them. But the top ones, if you look down this list, I would say, let's see. I would say probably certainly the top 50, most of the top 50 will stay in the draft, and then the rest will go back. And of course, we don't have a complete list because, there isn't an official list yet by the NBA. We'll probably have to wait till like Wednesday to get that official list, but we pretty much know, 95% of the guys. So any comments looking over this list? I have them ranked by our current draft board, not the one on the site, by the way. We haven't updated the one on the site because we're still working on it. But yeah, what do you think? These are the current rankings I have hidden in my computer. Cam, what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Rich. Like really down through the top 50, I imagine will stay in with, a couple exceptions. I could see a guy even like Holman Hawkins coming back, just another year with Illinois, try and make a deep playoff run.
Yep.
A lot of the transfers I could imagine staying in school. Aaron Bradshaw comes to mind. Kobe Johnson as well.
How about Harrison Ingram in North Carolina? I could see him coming back.
Definitely, possibly. Harrison Ingram as well. Yeah,
I'm a little surprised Jamal Shed says he's not coming back.
I'm not. I think it's time. I think this is probably as high as his draft stock's going to be.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I think, just strategically, you gotta send it at some point. Especially given, he's an upperclassman as well.
Yes.
But yeah, outside of that, not too many guys that I see coming back. I really think I'm with you. Like maybe down to like 51. About Tyron Grant Foster's gonna stay in.
Yeah. All right. So some guys I think we know for sure are coming back. Aaron Bradshaw. I mean, he's signed with Ohio State. And AJ Storr, like we said, he'll probably make more money next year at Kansas than he would, as a pro. I mean, the smart thing is not to be that short-sighted. I mean, you don't want to just sell out for 1 year, but in AJ Storr's case, would he really be drafted? Because this list, by the way, doesn't include the automatic draft qualifiers like Terrence Shannon, Dalton Connect. This list is only the early entries. So you throw those automatic qualifiers in, AJ Storr falls, we have him at 64 on this list. He falls even lower. I don't think he gets drafted. So then he's looking at a G League contract. I think he's much better solidifying his status, especially with his shot. His outside shot is what needs work. And defense. Defense.
Yep. There's a handful of guys too that they're just going to be better served, trying to improve draft stock for next year. Come in as that sort of automatic qualifier later on.
Definitely.
That's definitely the case with Bradshaw. That's a guy that was really highly recruited and
oh my God,
had a rough year.
It was like I think 4th overall.
Yep. So yeah, we'll get into these guys later. I'm excited for the summer.
For sure. And I think, so you might say, well, why does a guy do it? Well, if he gets invited to the combine, he's going to get valuable feedback. he's gonna be able to compete against his competition, and NBA teams are going to be talking to him and say, you really need to work on this, or you're doing this well, don't stop, and that's very valuable. So I don't blame them for testing, even though they know they're coming back. By the way, Johnny Furphy, even on this list without the automatic qualifiers, he's 71. So and then you throw in the automatic qualifiers, then he falls into the 120s. And I think if you look around the guys that he's around, just about everybody on this list is more productive than him, except for maybe like a guy like you just mentioned, Bradshaw. Bradshaw didn't get a ton of playing time. So, yeah, Furphy was more productive than him, but hell, most of the rest of these guys were way more productive than Johnny Furphy, are at least as athletic. So, yeah, come on now. All right. So, before we continue, we're going to bring on Coach James Jones. And as I said earlier in the show, we spoke to Coach Jones about a week ago. It was right after we had done our last episode and our last college episode. So we had to move it into this week. It was a great interview. Basically, he kind of explained the way the Ivy League works and how a coach at a mid-major conference who's not in the Power 5 conference, how he looks at the rest of college basketball. So we'll roll that interview right now. Today's guest is Coach James Jones, the all-time winningest coach at basketball coach at Yale and the second most successful coach in Ivy League history. He has coached the Bulldogs since 1999, and over that span, he has guided Yale to 6 Ivy League regular season championships and 4 NCAA tournament berths, and it would have been 5 had it not been for the COVID year. This past season, the Bulldogs finished with a 23-10 record, including a win over 4th-seeded Auburn in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Welcome to the show, Coach. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You look dapper.
Well, I try to. I'm not as good looking as you, so I got to dress the part.
Oh, my goodness. No one's ever said that, not even my wife. So we met on somewhat unusual circumstances, I would say, and I hope you don't mind if I explain to everyone.
Go right ahead.
All right, so it was the first day of the Ivy League tournament at a press conference that followed your win over Cornell. And despite my hand being raised for the duration, the moderator refused to acknowledge me until you insisted. You actually had to insist twice. Yeah. Now, the moderator, I found out later, was apparently a stickler for prefacing each question by saying your name and organization. And when previously called upon, I kept on forgetting to do that. Now, in my defense, you usually don't have to do that at most press conferences. And also, I wasn't at my best that day. I was in severe pain. And I came to find out later, just last week, that I have unstable vertebrae in my spine, and I need immediate surgery. So I'm going to be, in 10 days, I'm going to be on the operating table. But the point of all this is, even though I was in severe pain that day, you made my day, and I appreciated your kindness, and you always have my gratitude and respect, sir.
Well, Richard, you got it. Well, best of luck to you with that surgery. Obviously, that's the first I'm hearing about the pain that you were in. And again, right is right. And again, you're there with your hand up. I didn't understand why, didn't know if he didn't see you or whatever the case may be. But again, if you took the time to show up to the press conference and ask and want to ask a question, you should be given an opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't really know what I had done wrong either at the time. He came up and talked to me later, but he was rather annoyed with me. I was surprised, but whatever. So let's start with this past season. I'm no Ivy historian, but I don't recall personally a season when the league had 3 teams that could basically beat anybody in the country, and I'm talking about Yale, Princeton, Cornell. And when I say anybody in the country, maybe the exception would be UConn, because no one seems to be able to beat them. But And I also don't remember the league having as many pro prospects. What are your thoughts on the quality of the play in the league this year?
Well, the quality was really high. I mean, you mentioned those three teams, Yale, Princeton, and Cornell, and Brown. They had a tough season in a sense that at the beginning of the year, they lost a lot of close games. They could have easily have won 20 games, given the fact of all the games they lost by 1 or 2 points and some missed free throws, which obviously helped us win the game against them in the Ivy tournament. So you're talking about having four really good quality teams. And then you look at Penn and Harvard. Well, Penn, their best player left the team, and he through NIL went to St. John's, and they lost him. So Penn would have been a much better team this year had they had him, and the next best player, Slackard, who was injured most of the year, healthy. So the league is in really good shape, and we have some really good players. And the problem is that, and I'm sure you're going to get to this at some point, that just like every other lower level, guys are getting poached to go someplace else with the new rules that we have in the NCAA, and that's just unfortunate.
Right. In the tournament, it was no surprise to me that you knocked off Auburn, probably no surprise to you. And, you've done this before. I mean, in 2016, you knocked off Baylor. What did that victory do for you and your team? And was this your best squad of all time?
Well, throughout the season, you're going to have ups and downs. And so we had a low point during the season where we played Vermont, and we had them beat. The game was over. We were up by 5 with, 12 seconds to go, whatever it was. And there was some questionable officiating, let's just say, down at the end of the game, and we ended up losing it. And we had our banquet last night, and I talked about, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Wide World of Sports. You remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
The Thrill of Victory.
Jim McKay and Howard Cosell.
Yeah, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And we experienced that in reverse form. We had the agony of defeat against Vermont, and we had the thrill of victory against Brown and against Auburn. And I just remember at the end of the game against Vermont, one of my players, August Mahoney, who was involved in 2 terrible plays, again, both officiating miscues. And he hugged his father for like 20 straight minutes after the game because he was so distraught about the loss. And then to watch him turn around and embrace his father after the wins against Auburn and against Brown, just shows you the level of what college athletics can do and the ups and downs of it all and how it pings you in different places. And it's just such a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Okay. Looking ahead to next year, as you you didn't mention this, but August is a senior. He's going to be gone. So will be Matt Noling, a versatile forward, and your star center, Danny Wolf, put his name in the portal. You got some nice pieces still coming back, including Bez Mbang, an elite defender. You got wing John Poulikitis, who elite shooter who went crazy against Auburn, and you have defensive specialist Casey Simmons. So I know it's early days, but do you have significant newcomers coming in, and what underclassmen do you expect to make the next step up next season?
Well, one of the things, I don't really worry about our program because our culture is really good, and we've been able to win through our culture. And that's been really important for me. So no matter who's in our uniforms, we're going to be pretty good. And I have a great expectation for our team going forward. You mentioned Bez Mbang and John Poulikitis, 2 of the key pieces coming back for sure. We don't know what Danny's going to do. He may come back. He's trying to figure that out. And obviously, if he wants to come back, he's welcome with open arms because he really never left. But I think that, in this day and age with college basketball, with the rules that they have, they're making our sport more individualized. And it's hard to not allow kids to take a look at some of the things they want to look at. And we're fortunate here that we have a different education, and people come here for different reasons. Right. So most of the kids are going to stay and not try to pursue because, John and Bez, you got to believe they've been, getting dinged all season long about going someplace else. So we have those pieces coming back. You mentioned Casey Simmons, tremendous athlete, very athletic. someone that we need to get better, and he will work at it. He's only a sophomore this year. Yassine Gram was a bench player for us. He needs to shoot the ball better, but he played with a broken thumb and a groin injury the entire year. So there's some of that going on with him. And then we had some freshmen, Samson Allerton, who's tremendous, tremendously athletic. He turned down scholarships to Texas and TCU to come to Yale, and he's going to be really good. He was just playing behind Danny his freshman year, learning the role and learning what to do. So he'll be better for us next year, and I think going to be really good. Trevor Mullen, who was a freshman, a tremendous shooter, can do a lot of different things off the bounce, create for himself and for his teammates. So we expect a lot out of him. And then we have, Devin Arlington, who's a tough point that has played for us, and a young man who did a great job for us. Nick Townsend this past year, tremendous, strong forward. There's Jack Malloy, who's a strong forward for us, and he had a really good second half of the year. Struggled to begin the year, but the second half of the year in practice, he was tremendous. So I expect him to be really good for us. And then Teo Rice, who's our captain, and Amir. And I can't pronounce his last name correctly. The kid's been with me for 3 years, and I apologize for not being able to pronounce his last name correctly. But he's a really good player as well. So we have all those guys coming back, and now we have a bunch of guys coming in. We have 3 guys coming in. We have and they all had great senior years of high school. Riley Fox out of here in Connecticut, Concord, Connecticut. I think he's like the 8th all-time leading scorer in the history of Connecticut basketball. Isaac Celestin, who's down in Florida, who played on one of the best teams in Florida, is a really good player, tremendously athletic, shoots the ball, and could be similar to Matt Nolan, but a little bit better at the basket, so to speak. And then the third player is Jordan Braithwaite from the DMV, and he was voted MVP of his area. So, those 3 guys we expect to be really good for us. And, they're going to fight for time and fight for a position. Like I said, no matter who's going to be in the uniforms, we're going to be pretty good because of our culture and what we do here. And I have the best staff in the conference, and we'll do a good job of getting them ready.
Okay. You kind of already answered my next question, which was there any chance Danny would return? What would you say at this point? What is it that he's looking for that maybe Yale can't provide?
Well, I was asked that question. I got a text message from a old college reporter here at Yale by the name of Larry School. He asked me that question. What are the chances of him returning? And I said, it's in the hands of a 20-year-old. So a 20-year-old is going to make a decision about his life. So it's hard to try to figure out exactly what he's going to do. I think there's certainly a chance of him coming back. I think that the risk and reward is maybe too great for him to go somewhere else. But because right now he knows here, if he comes back, he's going to have a great opportunity. That being said, I think that if he's looking elsewhere, he's looking at some of the fringe stuff that some of the other places have, their strength coach, their nutritionist, their agility, all that stuff may be a little bit better in some other places. And he's taking a look to see if what they are. And we explain to him whatever it is that he has, we can supplement it here at Yale. So if he needs a better nutritionist, we can do that. If he needs a better strength coach, we'll figure out a way to get it done. So there are enough alums and people that are active in what we do to try to help. And hopefully, he's signed some stuff that he thinks is going to make him better. We can bring that to Party Yale, and we all get a little bit better.
Okay. I would think one of the at least to me, it seems to me, observing what's going on, and of course the portal is new to all of us, but it seems to me, compared to previous years, that the quality of the play in the league is actually kind of hurting it, in the sense that a lot of guys that you wouldn't normally see from the Ivy League hit the portal are hitting the portal. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. This year, last year, we only had one kid going to portal, and that was Jordan Dingle, who was a player of the year in the league.
Right.
So now I think that what kids are doing, they're trying to figure out if there's any way that they can get better situations where they are, or find something better for them elsewhere. I think that the education is certainly going to bind people to Yale and the Ivy League for the most part. but that's not true for everybody. If you're struggling financially, to pay to go to Yale because it's all non-scholarship, and then on fact that it's all non-scholarship, there aren't any other monies that you might receive. So not only are you paying $80,000 to go to school, you don't get the $200,000 that you could get someplace else. So it's a crazy world we live in. I tell people all the time that we're in a state of transition. College basketball isn't what it was. It's not what it's going to be. And we have to figure this out here and hopefully get through it in a positive way.
In terms of NIL, I would think, now I know the Ivy League operates different than every other league in the country, but in terms of NIL, I would think that the Ivy League schools would be able to provide as much as any school in the country. But do they do that?
Well, no, they obviously don't. There's some rules that are against it where, what's going on in the country right now is pay for play.
Right.
People are paying you the inducements to go play. That's kind of not allowed here, where you're supposed to be paid a consummate on what you're worth. But who's to judge that? If one of my players works out your son and, they see Danny Wolf on television and he's starstruck by Danny Wolf, and you bring him to Yale and have him work out with Danny twice a week for an hour, what's that worth to your son? You can't put a price tag on that. Like for a 7-year-old, like he's Michael Jackson. He's like the greatest thing ever, right? So it's one of those things you can't put a price tag on it. So those are some of the things that we're trying to figure out here and how to do it. We'll get to a point where I suspect that NIL is going to work in a little bit different way in this league, but it just hasn't gotten there yet.
Okay. As we continue to touch on, the Ivy operate. Another difference is there is no redshirting. If you miss a year, you're basically only allotted 4 years in the Ivy League, and that's done. And I would say, in a purest sense, it's beautiful. That you basically have real students and real kids that want to play the game and for the love of the game. However, there was a day when the Ivy League schools, when you and I were young men, could compete for the national championship, like Penn being in the Final Four with Magic Johnson. And before, even when we were little kids, we're the same age, by the way. So Bill Bradley, was in the Final Four at least once, maybe twice. I'm not sure. But anyway, my point is, Ivy League teams could compete for the national championship, but are those days gone forever? Or do you see maybe the Ivy League might adjust somewhat to accommodate?
Well, I mean, we just beat the number 4 team, one of the top teams in the country in Auburn, the top 10 team in the country, and Princeton went to the Sweet 16 last year.
Right.
So, and then several years prior to that, we beat Auburn to go to the second round, and we had Duke beat. Well, excuse me, we didn't have Duke beat. We were down by 3 points with 40 seconds to go. So, no, I don't think that time has passed. Like, the stars have to align for anybody. You look at the FAUs of the world. You look at the VCUs of the world. You look at all these teams.
George Mason.
You look at all these teams that have gotten to the Final Four. Well, again, you got to have a little luck. The stars got to be aligned. John Poulikitis needs to knock down, have 28 2 games in a row or 3 games in a row for us to do it, or somebody else has got to step up and shine. So it's certainly possible for us to compete against the best teams in the country, and we do. Like right now, it's almost impossible for the better teams in our league to get any non-conference games where we're playing against quad 1 teams because they don't want to play us.
Right. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, the co-chair of the NCAA D1 Transformation Committee, has recommended eliminating automatically qualifiers. I have gone on record vehemently saying this is the wrong idea. And I would think that it would eliminate a lot of teams, such as Ivy League teams, from competing in the NCAA tournament. And one of the alternative ideas they're throwing out there is having a tournament for the Power 5 conferences and then having a tournament for the mid-majors. What are your thoughts on Sankey's ideas?
Yeah, I don't agree with his ideas. I look at what we've been able to do, like say all these teams won't even play us, and they won't even, so like they think that, you know, their level is so much better than where we are. Well, I would argue that we don't, none of those teams will play Yale at Yale. You know,
Right.
it's not like Auburn's going to come here to play.
Right.
And, you know, if we were to play the game that we beat Auburn at Auburn, no way we win it. The way the officiating is going to go in that game,
Right.
it's the SEC officials. You know, it's not nationally televised. You know, certain things happen, right? But if you play a neutral court game against one of those teams, you have a much better chance of winning. And if you play them at your home, you have a much greater chance at winning. So it's a misnomer to think that just because they spend the money they do on college basketball and they provide as much as they do for their student athletes, to think that we can't beat them at our level. I think that our level is really good. Like, we had 3 teams in the top 100. So you can't tell me that, and that's just do KenPom stuff. But if we're able to be on the same level playing field, like, think about it. If we were to play 7 games against quad 1 teams in our home gym, well, we're going to win a few of those games. So now you have 2 or 3 quad 1 wins, and now you look at it differently. So to think that just because you're in the ACC or the SEC that you're better than these other teams, it's quite ridiculous, because again, you know, you're never seen on the same level, you're never given the same opportunities. And when you are in the NCAA tournament, you've seen the fact that we've won games. And like, our league has won games consistently. Harvard's won games in the league. Yale's won games in the league. Princeton's won games in the league. Penn's won games in the league. So we've done a really nice job against high major teams, playing against them. So, you know, I certainly don't agree with that. And I hope that the powers that be recognize that the beauty of the NCAA tournament is the fact that Yale plays Auburn and wins that game. If it's Auburn playing Vanderbilt or Auburn playing, you know, USC or UCLA, and, you know, there's no real upset there. There's no, because again, that perception, and again, upset is just a perception of what people think.
Right.
That's what you think is going to happen. That's not reality. That's why we play the games.
Right.
Exactly who's going to win.
I said in last week's show, I said, you know, if you're a basketball purist, as I am, and all the guys on our show are, you know, one of the first things we think in our head when we think about basketball is the movie Hoosiers. And that, you know, that the reason why we love Hoosiers is the reason why we love March Madness.
Yeah.
We want to see David go up against Goliath. We don't want to see Goliath go up against Goliath every time, you know.
Not every time. Like,
right, exactly.
And that's why that first week in the games is so special. Like,
right.
Those are the ones that are most followed. Like, those are the ones that everybody watches and
gets the whole country excited.
Exactly right. And so why would you want to change that? I mean, again, like I mean, you're changing the recipe. Why would you want to change the recipe for such? Like, if you have some chocolate chip cookies that are really good, why do you want to try to change it? You want to add
Well, I think because some people are going to get some dollars in their pockets. I think that's what.
Again, and that's what it's all about. And the way it is right now, there are too many of those teams that get in as it is. Like Indiana State, why aren't they in?
Exactly.
Like why aren't they in? Because again, they didn't have any opportunity to play any high major teams in their home building, and so now you can't assess. And none of the people that are on these committees really watch Indiana State enough to know how really good they are.
Yes, I agree.
And that's the problem. Like, we played at Kansas this past year, and we're winning. We were beating them at halftime. It almost takes an act of Congress to be able to do that at Allen Fieldhouse. And we led that game for the first 30 minutes of it. And then the kid McCutcheon, he went off on us and went
McCullough, yeah. Kevin McCullough.
Yeah, we couldn't stop him, and he hurt us. But outside of that, you know, we're right there. Like, we played Gonzaga the first game of the year, and I think we got 11, 12-point lead in the first half. And, you know, Danny Wolf gets into foul trouble, and he doesn't score a point in the game. And, like, so now it's one of those things that, like, if he doesn't get into foul trouble, and he gets into foul trouble, right? If he doesn't get into foul trouble and he has an average game, well, maybe you win that one. But it's hard to win those games on the road. In your own building or a neutral floor, have a much better chance.
Right. I know this doesn't really affect the Ivy League, but right now, conference realignment has become absurd. And I think for the average student athlete, I'm not talking about football players. I'm talking about basketball players, tennis players, lacrosse players. You know, it's going to be a major inconvenience, for example, for Stanford to travel to Florida State and Stanford to travel to Boston College. So, we've been talking on the show, and I'm wondering why there hasn't been a bigger reaction to realign conferences for all other sports beside football. Let football do its own thing and realign all the other conferences for all the other sports so we can so they will make geographic sense, so they won't put undue burdens on your average student athlete, and so that we can revive all these lost natural traditional rivalries.
Yeah. So
Again, I know this doesn't affect the Ivy League, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I agree with you 100%. I would put basketball in the same realm as football, though, because they're revenue generating sports. So you have the monies to go out and play the games that, like, and they're all flying charter anyway. So you're going to be on the kids from Stanford and UCLA, they're going to be on charter flights anyway, flying out. They said they're going to be a little bit longer flight, but they're going to be on a charter. They can study. They got Wi-Fi. So again, it's just like being in your dorm room for them. But all these other student athletes, the tennis players, the soccer players, they should leave the Pac-12 the way it is, outside of men's and women's basketball, and also with football, and keep the Pac-12 the way it is, keep it intact. So all those teams, as you said, so the teams from the softball team and the volleyball team, they could just have their normal rivalries and their normal travel, because they're going to have to fly commercial. And now you find the missed class time that they have. I mean, I can't imagine what that's going to be like. But what these conferences are saying is that we don't really care, because there's so much money involved in men's basketball and actually really football. We don't care about the other student athletes. And so here's a great one for you. My son is a tennis player, and he's going to go to a college in the Big East, and I won't dime him out here. But we went to their admitted students day. And so we go into the gym and we meet everybody, and it's, they have this, the president speaks and all this, and it's a beautiful place. I used to actually work there as a assistant coach for summer camps. Beautiful building. They just have redone it. And then we go out to the tennis courts and they look like a piece of crap, right? Like there's no money that's been put into the tennis program, because the tennis program isn't a revenue generating sport. We don't care about this. We care about the men's basketball team, or we care about the football team. And that's a problem. And that's what all this, what we're going to with NIL and pay for play, with all the money being poured into that's disrupting all the other sports. You will find down the road that some of these sports are going to get cut or turn into club sports, because the university simply can't afford to handle these other sports, given the less resources that come into the university from donors who are paying players, right? And given the amount of money that we have to spend to have these sports be productive and be really good. I saw something on Instagram that Yale spends like $1.6 million on basketball, and Auburn spends like 13.8, right? And that's not even counting what the players make for NIL.
Right.
Like you could tack on another $5 million at least on top of that.
Right.
So this is a whole different world that we're living in right now. And like I'm lucky I'm on the back nine of the back nine. I don't have to do this for another 20 years.
Well, that my next question was going to be specifically about basketball. What is your biggest concern about, with NIL, with the portal, with realignment? What's your biggest concern for the future of basketball, college basketball?
Yeah, it's not directed toward teams anymore. It's directed toward individuals. We're breeding individuals through what we're doing. So if we're going to tell young men that, hey, don't worry about a commitment that you make, you can leave wherever you want to go. And it doesn't have to have a reason for it. You can leave because there's more money on the pot someplace else. Well, so now you're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about building something with a group of men to do something special. You're thinking about what can be done. What can Brown do for me, right? So I think that's the biggest problem that we have, that the culture that we're breeding takes away from teamism, takes away from something, trying to do something special. I think that the greatest, Larry Brown was quoted by saying, basketball is the best game ever invented if played the right way. And what you're asking, you're telling kids not to play the right way. It becomes more about you. What am I going to get?
Right.
What can I get out of this? Or as opposed to, what can I do to make this better? And that's a shame, because basketball and college athletics are a beautiful thing. They galvanize, they bring people together. And now we're taking it up, we're tearing it apart.
Yeah, well said. Speaking of commitment and loyalty, 25 years at one school is unheard of these days, and very admirable, I should say. I'm sure that you've been approached by numerous schools over the years, and you're young enough to do this for at least another decade. So do you want to retire as Yale's head coach?
I have not been approached by anybody that has a better offer than what Yale has given me, and an opportunity to coach the young men I have here. It's kind of a misnomer. Like I actually expected to be called for a number of jobs that just never happened. So that being said, I am very fortunate to work at this fine university and have opportunity to coach these young men. What my life has in store for me, I don't know, but I do know if I stay at Yale for the rest of my career, I'll be a happy man.
Okay, that surprises me, that you haven't been approached more often. Very, very surprising. All right, so lastly, I'm gonna let you go with this one. When you retire, how will you spend your time?
Oh, that one's an easy one. I want to have a house on a lake that's near a golf course.
There we go.
I want to go play golf every day. I want to come home and ask my wife, honey, do you want to go out on a boat with me? No, good. And I'm going to go out on a boat, and I'm going to have a cocktail or two. I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to fish, and I'm just going to enjoy that time on the water, and reminisce about the good old days, and spend time with my wife and my family, and do some traveling. But the day-to-day, I love to have a house on a lake near a golf course where I can hit a golf ball every day, and probably hit it poorly most days, but that's that's half the fun, and just enjoy that time. And that's the goal, and that hopefully that happens for me.
All righty. That's about what I would wish for. I was an avid golfer before my back started acting up. Not very good one, but avid. I love the sport. My second favorite sport behind baskbasketball. Hopefully after surgery, I'll be able to play again.
Well, hey, good luck with the surgery, by the way.
Thank you, Coach. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I wish you the best next season. And hopefully you'll come back and visit us, and maybe we can even play some golf when I get healed.
There you go, Richie. It's on you. You let me know.
All right, I will, sir. All right. Thank you so much.
You have a great day.
All right. Once again, I want to thank Coach Jones for joining us. It was great to talk to him. So now what we're going to focus on, the special thing we're going to focus on this week, is the first combine happened last week, and that was Portsmouth. And I really want to get down there. I couldn't obviously this year because of my back, but I really want to get down there in the future. I heard, where this takes place, Cam. I don't know if you know it, but it takes place at a high school gym near the beach in Virginia. And apparently it's a small town. So if you go out to the bar and have some dinner and drinks, you're almost bound to end up sitting next to some NBA scout. So you and I should make that trip sometime soon, or one of us at least. So what I've done is I kind of like in our stock report fashion, I kind of have the biggest winners, I think, at the event, and the biggest losers, and then the guys who kind of did a little bit of both. I'm not sure what to make of it. But first of all, we'll talk about the MVP of the event. One thing I want to say before we continue was the names in this event. I don't remember. I mean, like, we're talking really high level guys for Portsmouth. I think this is the most talented group that ever played at Portsmouth. You know, a lot of times you have a lot of mid-major guys, maybe some D2 guys, and you're like, who the hell is that?
Mhm.
This year, I knew just about everybody, except for the one D2 guy. And actually, I knew of him. I just haven't seen him play. So yeah, all right. So we'll start with the MVP of the event. And that was Tristan Honora of Cleveland State. Tristan has ideal size for the NBA, and he is a small forward, could probably play some guard for you, could probably play some power forward for you. And he averaged 16 points per game, shot 49% from the floor. He was 12 of 13 from the free throw line, had an assist turnover ratio of 2.0. So he was named the MVP of the event. But actually, I thought a couple other players to me stood out even more. And I think the two that I thought were bigs, and that was Josh Oduro of Providence and Isaac Jones of Washington State. They both produced tremendous numbers. Oduro is 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. Jones 6'8" with a 7'4" wingspan. So that's a +8 wingspan. But his numbers: 19 points per game, 79% from the field, 7 rebounds per game, 2 steals per game. And if you've watched Washington State this year, the one thing I was amazed, I thought, Isaac Jones was just kind of like a big burly guy, coming from Idaho, who just kind of, bully people in the post. He's got a lot more versatile game than that. And I think he was the biggest winner at this event. Another guy I want to mention, and I'll list the rest of the names, but I'm not going to talk about everybody. And I'll let Cam see if he has any comments here. But the biggest winner in terms of the athletic testing, and this is probably no surprise for those of you who follow LSU or Alabama Birmingham, was Eric Gaines. He finished at the top of every athletic testing event, and including tying for the best vertical. Now, they only do standing vertical. They don't do max. Why? Because standing vertical is a lot more important, folks. Everybody talks about max vertical. It's probably the least important measurement that we get in the draft process, and that's the one everybody wants to talk about. His standing vertical was 33.5. His shuttle was 3.1. His lane was 10.8, and his sprint, also the best in the event, 3.1. The other thing is he measured 6'1" with a 6'8" wingspan, which is excellent, because 6'1" is on the low end of what you want to be, in the NBA, but the 6'8" wingspan puts him in the running. The other thing was, the biggest thing on Eric Gaines is, we all knew he was athletic, was his efficiency. At this event, he was efficient. 12 points per game, 56% from the field, almost 5 assists per game with a 2.8 assist turnover ratio. I think if Gaines can reasonably get an outside shot, this guy can make the NBA. And I'll give you a good example. We're watching Lou Dort yesterday. Lou Dort had maybe the ugliest shot I've ever seen from a high-level prospect. And if you go back and look at my scouting report that I did on the website, how many years ago that was, 4 or 5 years ago, I said that. I said, this is like the ugliest shot I've ever seen in my life. And
It just looks bad.
Huh?
Now he's a plus 40% shooter. Damn near.
Exactly. And yesterday he went crazy. Always plays great defense, but he also went crazy in the offensive end. So outside shot is the thing I worry about the least, because I think it's one of the things you can improve upon the easiest. but you can't improve. It's hard to improve your speed. It's hard to improve your vertical. You can't improve your wingspan. Eric Gaines has all those things. So yeah. All right. So I'll list out the rest of the guys who really did well, and then Cam, if you have any thoughts, let me know. Sean East from Missouri made the all-tournament team. DJ Horn from NC State made the all-tournament team. Jameer Young, all-tournament team. Isaiah Coatsart from Eastern Kentucky did very well. Xavier Johnson from Southern Illinois. Isaiah Crawford from Louisiana Tech. Hunter Couture from Virginia Tech. Tyree Samuel from Florida. Brendan Carlson from Utah. Jesse Edwards of West Virginia. Enrique Freeman of Akron. Alan Flanagan of Auburn. And lastly, Riley Minix from Morehead State. Any thoughts on these guys?
Oh, Rich, that I think it's always hard to kind of judge for me based on Portsmouth. I mean, I think it gives you a nice little snapshot of how these guys are doing over, it's a weekend experience for them.
Yeah, and 3 games max. It's 4 days, 4 days, 3 games.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest takeaways are really like ultimately the measurables on guys. And
yeah.
A few of these guys I was surprised actually how short their arms were. A handful of guys that, they're maybe +1 inch on their wingspan. I mean, I know that's better than the average person. But
a lot of times you expect guys the NBA, the average is +4, +5.
Yep. So that's something that stood out to me, like, especially the guy, like, I like Hunter Couture a lot. I don't know yet if he's an NBA prospect truly, but I think he's a really good college player. I think he could become a NBA prospect at some point. But at the very least, a nice international player. But I mean, he's got a +1 inch wingspan. Watching him play, I wouldn't expect that.
6'2". And by the way, these measurements are with shoes. They only measure, I don't know why, it's stupid, but he's 6'2" with shoes. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Those are a lot of the things that I kind of pick out from Portsmouth. It's kind of like a little preview for the combine as far as, what kind of measurables you're going to see from guys. And 2, you get a little bit of a, first look at how they're matching up with, guys at their level. So that was my big takeaway. I'm ready for the Biggest Losers, Rich, because there's a guy at the top of the Biggest Losers who, I'm a big fan of, a local kid from my area, but Drew Pember, I've kind of given up on him as an NBA prospect. I would love to see him have an international career, but it looks like he had a real struggle at Portsmouth, and it's not all that surprising to me. He kind of had to step back this year in college. Max Agenus, his shooting percentages were a real struggle. I think that's kind of the commonality among all of these guys that kind of lost a little bit of their stock, just shooting struggles. But he was pretty quick in the sprint. 3:11 is a nice number. But yeah, those are the 2 guys, that maybe lost a little bit of stock that stand out to me.
Yeah, Drew Pember, friend of the show. We had him on last year. At Asheville, last 2 years, he's knocked it out. But every time he plays against a good opponent, they shut him down. Now, you could say if he played on a better team, that wouldn't happen. That's why I was keen to watch it. Now, keep in mind, we're only talking 3 games. Anybody can have 3 bad games in a weekend, okay? Maybe you're even hurt. Who knows? But I was really interested because obviously, these teams, he's playing with a bunch of other good players. So he should be able to distribute and should be able to score. If they double him, he should have options. And yeah, he didn't do anything really well on the floor. I will say he didn't test poorly for a guy who's 6'10". He didn't test poorly. He didn't test good either, but yeah, so that's encouraging. But yeah, now of course Drew Pember started at Tennessee, then went to Asheville, get more playing time. But yeah, I was sad actually because I like Drew, that he couldn't do better. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe he gets a G League Combine invite, but that's the thing. That's what this does, basically. This event, there's only going to be a handful of guys that are going to get invited to the G League Combine, and that's what Portsmouth actually functions as. It's kind of like a filter. You know, the best guys here will probably get G League Combine, but we're only talking maybe 5 to 10 guys out of this group of, 60 some guys. So yeah. Other guys that did before, another friend of the show, Max Fiedler of Rice. He not only did he play poorly, he tested very badly in just about all events. Now we knew Max wasn't an athlete. The one thing I was always really enjoyed about Max's game was he plays the game the right way, sets screens, hustles, rebounds, and also loved his passing. He's one of those guys you can't really double, and you can run your offense through, through the high post. And he did almost had 4 assists per game here, but that was the one bright spot. Shahada Wells, obviously worried about his size because he's only 5'11", and he did very well at some of the athletic stuff, but didn't play well on the floor. Fardaz Amac of California, terrible, 30% from the floor. Also one of the slower sprint times. Eric Dixon, Villanova, weighed in at 270, 6'8". He did poorly at every athletic testing event, including a sprint of 3.6. I think I could beat him. And he also, overall, he didn't play badly. One area, though, he actually played pretty well on the floor, but he did go 2 of 10 from deep. So I think Eric's got to lose some weight. I mean, he really sees himself as a stretch guy, but if you're going to be a stretch guy, you better be ready to defend, because he's not a great shot blocker. He's not a great rebounder. Basically, he's an offensive player and who can score inside and out, but he's going to have to prove that athleticism if he wants to play defense at the NBA. AJ Hogard, surprisingly, didn't test well in the sprint and shuttle. Also, just a problem that has plagued him for 4 years at Michigan State, plagued him here. He averaged 3.3 turnovers per game. Will Baker did not test well, did not play very well. Will Baker's changed schools so many times I forget where was he this year? LSU. So he didn't look good for him. Tyler Robertson, who some people had NBA, I will say, only one place I saw had him last time I looked, had him in their top 100. Freshman from Portland who had a great start to the season and then actually finished the season injured and wasn't playing. But Portland's schedule is like, the Sisters, especially preseason schedule, they play the Sisters of Poor, they play Division IV schools. And yeah, he was racking up big numbers, but here he did not test well athletically. He didn't play very well, only measured 6'5" with a 6'7" wingspan. He's also has his name in the draft. Please go back to Portland or somewhere. Also, Clarence Daniels from New Hampshire, I was aware of because he was one of the best players, maybe the player of the year in the American East. Has great size, tested okay, averaged nearly 9 rebounds per game as a small forward at this event. But one of his struggles at New Hampshire is shooting. And he didn't shoot well here. He has another year, so hopefully he comes back as well. Any more comments on the guys who did crappily? Is that a word?
No, I'm good, Rich.
One thing you pointed out, and I was thinking the same, was, the guys who test well, those are the numbers that are really meaningful here, because you can have a bad day and but if you have a good day, that means that's in you. You know, you can do that again. And there's no such thing as like one day you can run the sprint at 3.1 and then you can never do that again, you know, unless you get hurt, you know. And so another guy who was right behind Eric Gaines in terms of testing was Alan Flanagan of formerly of Auburn, finished up at Ole Miss. He did have a high number of turnovers at this event. Didn't shoot great, but also averaged close to 3 steals per game. Alan Flanagan, his biggest problem has been shooting. He's about a 30% career 3-point shooter, but he certainly has the size and the athleticism to be in the NBA. So we shall see. Now to the guys who had up and down games or up and down performances. And you can see here in the guys, the things that are highlighted in orange are where they didn't do well. But the things that aren't highlighted is where they did do well. And we'll start off with Joel Soriano, and he made the all-tournament team, averaged 17 points per game and 13 rebounds per game. But coming in at 6'10", 270, he did poorly at the athletic events. I mean, this is a super big, strong guy. And I guess my question, you know, we talked about Soriano at the beginning of the year, Cam, and, you know, we knew he could really dominate inside, really powerful guy, but we also said this guy's really not athletic. This is kind of like maybe a poor man's Valanciunas. So what do you think about somebody like this who you know can score inside, you know can rebound, you know can block some shots?
So the thing that stands out to me is actually his lane agility it's a rough score. Everything else though, for a guy his size, I mean, 25.5 standing vert when you're 6'10" and you have nearly a 7'4" wingspan, you feel that vertical a lot more than
Right.
you know a 6'8" guy even.
Right.
So I think his measurables are honestly I would even say pretty good for a guy of his size. Especially that vertical. I didn't really expect that from him. And on the court, I think he crushed it. I mean, he showed the rebounding. One of probably the skill that we like the most about him. I'm interested to see him in the mixed bag category. You know, add a little bit to that, Rich. I'm kind of curious. Is it the measurables for you, or is
it's the measurables? I mean, you know, he tested with these guys. If they got orange, that means they were near the bottom. Now, obviously, you know, at 6'10", 270, we expect, you know, usually the heavier you are, the worse you're going to do. And the lighter you are, the better you're probably going to do. So that was expected. If Soriano had come up just with some numbers that weren't in orange, you know, especially like, you know, the lateral test, the shuttle and the lane, you know, which really are important for defense, then maybe I don't put him in the mixed bag. But right now, to me, you know, he's going to be in the draft. He's out of eligibility. You know, he produced really good numbers at the college level for the last 2 years. And, you know, question is, I have a mixed bag because I don't know if he's really a serious draft prospect.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think if he can get up to the NBA level, he's clearly going to be a specialist. But I think I honestly, there's a need for these bigger centers now. You know, granted, we'll get into NBA later, but you know, it's looking like the Pelicans are going to get swept. You know, they have Valanciunas, but you know, he's played a big role for them this year. I mean, granted, he's starting, but he's not playing, you know, in the full game. They've actually even kind of gone away from playing him in crunch time.
Yeah,
but you know,
especially yesterday.
Yeah, but I mean, just having a guy with that size. I mean, even go back to the Cavs. I mean, Tristan Thompson's gotten playoff minutes.
True.
You know, just a specialist that can come in and really mix it up on the boards is valuable. It's not incredibly valuable, but with a second round pick or an undrafted, two-way spot, that's a guy that teams could take a shot at. I mean, especially too, like at his size, I mean, he's 270. I mean, if he could get down to say 250, 260, that might really change some of these measurables that we're seeing from him.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know. I think
Yeah, I
Soriano's-
don't care about the vertical. I don't care about the sprint, but I do care about the shuttle and the lane.
Yeah. Same. But it's hard to move 270 that quick, especially too, like, a sprint, it's one direction. You can, any guy, and really like big guys have an advantage in the sprint. So they got longer legs. It's one direction. It's straight up speed. But I mean, if he could shave a couple pounds, you could see that shuttle and that lane come down quite a bit. So definitely the lane, because that's a lot of changing direction. And I mean, that's what he's going to have to do in the NBA if he wants to, make a deal.
Right.
So, a couple other guys on here too that, similar experiences. I mean, Ray J Davis. Oh my God, Ray J Dennis. Yeah, similar measurables. I mean, you can almost look at his measurables. They're damn near the same as Soriano's, and he's 6'2".
Yeah.
That's
he did
alarming.
okay though. He did okay in the lane and shuttle. It was just the vertical and sprint, and the same goes for Aaron Estrada.
Yeah. So I mean, you really you compare, Soriano's measurables. You're looking at, guards that are considered, wings and guards that are considered on the same sort of plane as recruits or as prospects that, their measurables aren't all that great either. At least he's, 6'10" with a 7'4" wingspan, damn near. So we'll see. Anybody else that really stood out to you in the mixed bag, Cat? That's like, man, I thought this guy was gonna come in and crush it.
What I found interesting was, the two guys, it was Estrada and Dennis. You have two guys that were moving from small programs up to Power Six conference. They did really well on the court, especially Ray J Dennis. And they did really well on the court at this event. Estrada made the all-tournament team, and I thought Ray J Dennis should have made the all-tournament team. But, of course, Estrada measured at 6'4", but only has a 6'6" wingspan. Dennis is only 6'2", but he luckily measured almost a 6'9" wingspan. And to me, the question is, here you have two guys that aren't great athletes, but they do produce on the floor, and especially Dennis. I have him rated significantly higher on our draft board. I'd say he's probably about 120, probably around that Furphy area. And like I said, once people pull out of the draft, these guys, everybody will move up who's staying in, and Dennis and Estrada are out of eligibility. My question is, are you worried that these guys aren't great athletes?
No. I just think the way that the NBA game is played, I think athleticism and measurables matters less now. I mean, look at what Jalen Brunson has done for the Knicks. If you look at him, I mean,
and Ray J plays a lot like Brunson.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a skill game.
Yeah, so does Estrada for that matter too. They both have that post up stuff and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you have the skill set to overcome a lack of measurables, it doesn't matter. It's a mindset thing. It's a experience thing. And I think Ray J Dennis, especially, like, his assists per game is really impressive. I think there are some stats that I take away. Scoring, I could care less about from an event like this.
Mm-hmm.
I think passing and defense are things that really pop up, because you got to think about it this way. I mean, there's no prep for this. You come in, you find out who the five is that you're going to play with, and that's who you're running with, for that game. And most of the time, you're going to switch up that roster again in your next two games. So it's like, positive assist to turnover ratios, positive assist, like higher assist scores. That shows that you have an inherent knowledge and like you're seeing that player's IQ for the game outside of, a system. I think that's really important from a recruiting aspect or from a scouting aspect, because it's one thing to average 6.5 assists in college, where you have a system, you play with the same guys, where everybody's supposed to be, versus it's pretty Wild West. I'm rolling in, I don't know. Oh, I'm playing with Soriano this game. Cool. I think he's going to be here. We're going to play a little pick and roll. I'll find him on the short roll. That's the stuff that you need to see from these guards to really, even consider them in the draft. So that's something I really like to see. All the shooting, scoring, doesn't matter as much for me.
Well, what's nice in both, again, in Estrada and Dennis's case, especially Dennis, he averaged 14 points per game, but almost 7 assists per game, shot 41% from deep, and had an assist turnover ratio of 2.5. So how he missed making all tournament with those numbers, I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
All right, so we'll finish off the mixed bag number. Tyson Walker didn't shoot well. One thing, he's always been more of a driver than a shooter. And he did some things nice in terms of playmaking. In fact, he led the event with assist turnover ratio of 6.0, average 4 assists per game. Did pretty well in the athletic testing, but he's only 6 foot. 6'4" wingspan, and only shot 38% from the field. Boogie Ellis is probably the highest ranked guy on our draft board. He's right around 100 at this event, at least going into this event. Boogie didn't shoot well, but he did average 4 assists per game with a 1.7 assist turnover ratio. Also tested out pretty nicely, measured at 6'1" with a 6'6" wingspan. I actually thought Boogie was a little taller than that. Santiago Vescovi, one of friends of the show, also Ray Dennis's friend of the show. A lot of guys have been on the show that were at the Portsmouth. Santiago, I don't understand it, and maybe you could fill me in on this. Pretty shot. His shot looks nice. There's no hitches or anything, but at this event, shot 22% from the field, 3 of 18 from deep. He was also 10 of 10 from the free throw line. Averaged a nice close to 4 assists per game, 1.6 turnover ratio, tested out nicely, measured pretty nicely, 6'3", 6'7" wingspan. What do you make of Santiago? He seems like a tough player, a player who plays heady, but man, his shooting is just so streaky and really has been off, for like the past year.
Yeah, I think he has a pretty shot. I'd be curious to see, if you timed his release. I think he would be on the slower side. Maybe in the, I hate to say like lower, I would say he's like 50th percentile in like release speed. He generally has to kind of set his shot up ahead of time. Like he's never going to be a quick release guy. And also too, he can't really make his own shot most of the time. He kind of needs to be set up. I think a lot of times in events like this, you're not getting as many of those setup shots.
Right.
They're used to kind of playing in the system to get to those.
Exactly.
Granted, he got 18 shots, so that to me kind of shows
from deep,
from three. From three. So that kind of shows to me that maybe he was trying to isolate a little bit more and produce those shots, which is what he struggles to do. He really has to. He plays more like a shooting guard than maybe his size and his skill set suggests.
Right. And he does a lot of work off the ball, coming off screens, and that's where I think he's at his best.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's by far where when he's at his best. Maybe and really like ball handling wise, I would say he's like your third option ball handler. He's like your Lou Dort ball handler.
Right.
Like if you're running offense through him, that's probably not the best thing for your team. I love Santiago Vescovi. I think he's a really great college player. I can see him having a great international career. I just don't see him really as a.
He played at the Australian NBA academy in Australia, so he's familiar there. He could speak Spanish, so he could play in Spain.
Yeah, he's Uruguayan.
Yeah, but he speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
He's been all over the world, so that's where I see him going. I would love to see him in the NBA, but I think he'd be happier playing in Spain or playing in Australia, being a star, or at least a good player, a good role player at those levels. I think that's where he's headed. What do you think?
I think so too. Yeah, I think he's going to have a real nice international career. I think the style of play that he has will fit better.
Yeah,
in an overseas.
Yeah,
kind of setup.
Agreed. And the last player I want to mention before we wrap up Portsmouth is Quincy Guerrier, who's just unbelievably dreadful shooting, 21% from the field, including 1 of 14 from deep. Keep on going, Quincy. Just keep on trying. But he also
I will say though, Rich, playing in a high school gym, coming from college stadiums, big difference.
Yep, no doubt.
Big difference.
No doubt. But he also did some really good things. 8 rebounds per game, close to 2 blocks per game. And he measured, had a 32-inch vertical, 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. Quincy's athletic. Quincy can score inside. He's trying to work on his shot. If he gets there, I still think he's, G League player type of player, but I think he has the athleticism and the work ethic and so forth that to succeed. And damn, if he could hit a shot, he could be a real valuable player. All right, so that wraps up Portsmouth. So from here on out, I'm going to let Cam run the NBA portion of the show. So what do you got for me, Cam?
Yeah, Rich, I just wanted to update, the listeners on our NBA Pick'em competition. We don't have any scores just yet, but we did end up cutting the show a little bit short last week. We went in depth on the first round, and that's all that we needed to do. But I did think the listeners could probably get a little bit interested in our consensus picks. This is based on 5 of our analysts' combined picks in the NBA Pick'em. So our consensus picks for the first round, we ended up going with the Celtics in 5, which is looking just about right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Celtics are currently up 2-1 on the Heat after throwing away an absolute stinker in Game 2. But I think the way that series is looking, 5 is probably the number for the Celtics. With the 4 or 5 matchup between the Cavs and the Magic, we ended up going with the Magic in 6. Also, maybe looking pretty good. We'll get into that series in a little bit more detail coming up. The 2-7 matchup with the Knicks 76ers, our consensus was Knicks in 7. So hopefully, for Rich's sake, we're going to see a competitive series. We'll have to get into that later on.
That's been the most compelling series, I think, so far.
Oh, it's been fun, hasn't it? We'll get into that more in a sec. In the 3-6 matchup, we went Pacers in 6, also looking pretty favorable for us. In the West, with the 1-8 matchup, we went OKC in 6, probably going to be under that number for that series. In the 4-5 Clippers Mavericks, we went Mavericks in 7. In the 2-7 Nuggets Lakers, we went Nuggets in 5, also looking just about right. In the 3-6 matchup, Timberwolves and the Suns, our consensus was Wolves in 7. Not looking to be that competitive of a series. We'll talk about it coming up. And then as we go through into the later rounds, we did pick the later rounds. Granted, a few of us are going to be missing out on a couple of teams. That's how our scores are going to wrap up for the rest of the playoffs. We'll pick our winner, once we finally reach the finals. But Eastern semis, we went Celtics. Eastern semis, second game, the Knicks in 5. Ooh. In the West, in the semis, we went with the Mavs in 7 and the Nuggets in 6. Going all the way to the Eastern finals, the Celtics also predicted to win that series in 6. In the West, the Nuggets again in 6 games. NBA champions, our consensus pick was the Nuggets. in a competitive series, 7 games, it's usually a pretty good bet for the finals to go a little bit longer. And the runner-up, of course, Celtics. We'll have to check back every once in a while on these games, just to also to reward those who made a correct deeper pick. Those are going to have a weighted score going all the way up to the finals. That's a 25-point score for that round. I'm really curious to see how our scores shape up after the first round, Rich. I know we uploaded this to the website as well. So if you're a little bit more curious, maybe you want to dig into some of our picks, some of our thoughts, check out the article on the website. But let's get ahead started on the NBA notebook. I got some interesting takes for you, Rich. I'm curious what you're thinking. Hopefully, we'll have Doc join us here in a little bit as well. But man, this playoffs has just been awesome so far. I think the level of competition has been absolutely off the charts this year. We've seen just about everything from game winners, incredible individual performances, come from behind wins, and we've even seen some really surprising upset games. I outlined a couple of games that really stood out to me, Rich, but what do you think has been your favorite game just so far in the playoffs to watch, just as a fan, and as an NBA, enjoyer? I'm going to call you a casual nowadays because you haven't been following the league as much as you used to.
Well,
But
I've seen at least a portion of every playoff game so far. So, and a lot of them I've seen the whole thing. To me, Denver Lakers game 2, Jamal Murray. I actually thought Denver was going to come back last night and finish off that series, but they didn't, surprisingly. It was funny though how the announcers made such a big deal out of it, and I'm like, LeBron won't be swept. He won't be swept. He won't allow this. And I'm like, what's the matter? They're going to lose the next game. Come on now. Sixers game 3, of course, when they pulled to 2-1 in game 3. Game 2 was, as a Sixers fan, was a little disturbing. I thought they kind of got that game kind of stolen from them at the very end. I thought Maxey for sure was fouled. And so they should have had foul shots instead of, the Knicks getting the ball. And the fact that, they talk about DiVincenzo hitting that shot. Well, how many chances did he have before he finally put it down?
yeah, you got a couple in there.
Yeah. And, the other things that have stood out to me is like how some of these teams have just looked lifeless, New Orleans, Phoenix, the Bucks, they've been pretty competitive, but they're done now. Lillard's not playing today, and Giannis is still out. So that series, I think, is I will give the credit though. The Bucks have been competitive with the Pacers without their best player, but I don't think they will be today. And then they're going to be down, or is that it? No. Where's that series stand?
The Bucks and Pacers.
Yeah.
They play tomorrow.
It's
that's
today. It's today.
It is today. You're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Right now it's Pacers 2-1.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be.
That's probably going to go up.
It's going to be 3-1. So then the series will go back to Milwaukee. Yeah, they still might have a chance to make it interesting, but it's not looking good for Milwaukee.
No. I think one of the biggest stories, this year, the Western, top 3 seeds, really like the 3 juggernauts from the regular season, they've all really looked the part so far in the playoffs. The Nuggets right now, we just mentioned they have that 3-1 lead over the Lakers. It was looking like it could turn into a full-on sweep. They've been really, really good in the series. They have those kind of time periods where they look like they're kind of sleepwalking a little bit, but they always kind of find a way to come back, especially in game 2. OKC has looked absolutely dominant over the Pelicans. Right. Charles Barkley was joking last night on the TNT broadcast that they had to go to Galveston. They didn't even earn a trip to Cancun. I would agree with that. And probably the biggest surprise, even just looking at the odds, betting odds, Vegas is Minnesota taking this 3-0 lead, excuse me, over the Phoenix Suns. It's the first time in franchise history that the Wolves have ever held a 3-0 margin in a series, playoff series. So that's a little piece of history for the Timberwolves franchise that's been a struggle for a long time. Rich, should we get our brooms out for any of these series, from here on out? Do we think that any of these opposing teams still have a little bit of fight in them?
No.
I think the Lakers have the most fight left.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I would be shocked to see them come and get a win in Denver,
Right.
even after that game in LA.
I will say this about the Lakers. As they repeated over and over and over last night, the Lakers have, in minutes played, have had a huge advantage. They've been the lead for most of the series. It's just been the fourth quarter. Now, last night in the fourth quarter, they didn't fold. And I think the lead maybe got down to 7 or 8. I know it got down
I think
to 8.
that's as close as it got.
Yeah, but I don't know if it got to 7. So they held on. And I will say, if they do win in Denver, it's like uh-oh time, But OKC, they're in. Minnesota, they're in. And it's not just because New Orleans and Phoenix have been terrible. OKC and Minnesota are making them look terrible on top. Yeah. These are two teams that have built the right way, have continuity. They have youth, they have depth. Where Phoenix, is just just thought that they were gonna put a bunch of old players. It's just we knew this wasn't gonna work. I think majority of us on the show said it just wasn't gonna work.
Yeah, I think I knew I liked the Timberwolves to win this series. I just thought on a matchup basis, granted they didn't play very well against the Suns in the regular season. I just think if you look down Minnesota's roster, they're kind of built for the playoffs. And I mean, a big difference too. I mean, they have Naz Reid, they have Jaden McDaniels this year. They didn't have those guys last year in the playoffs, and they still made a pretty good run. I think that, the way it's shaping up right now, the next round is going to be a matchup between Minnesota and Denver. That's going to be an absolute slugfest of a series. I'm really excited to see it. Yeah, I think all three of these challengers, they're done. I would be shocked to see any of them actually carry another game in any of these series. But so moving on, Rich, I picked out 3 series, from the playoffs but so far that I think are getting real interesting. The first one is, the 4-5 matchup in the East. It's the Cavs and the Magic. As of last night, this series is now tied 2-2, but this is one of those rare series where it's an absolute swing home and home. The first 2 games, the Cavs looked like they were lined up to maybe even sweep the Magic. They dominated those first 2 games. Granted, they didn't shoot very well. They actually didn't get over 44% from the field in those first 2 games, scoring wise. So shows you maybe a little bit how strong the Magic defense really is. But once the series shifted to Orlando, the script completely flipped, and the Cavs look like they're ready to fall apart completely. They really folded in really both Game 3 and Game 4. Game 3, they pulled their starters basically at halftime, and ran with the bench for the rest of the game. They gave up that early. These are 2 of the biggest playoff defeats in Cavs history. Game 3 being a 38-point blowout. Rich, I know I kind of started to convince you on the Magic, but looking at the series, what are you thinking so far? Are we going to see a 6 game? Do you think that the Cavs still have another home win in them? I'm curious what you think about the series.
Yeah, it's been such a home dominated series. I have to think the Cavs are going to play better at home and win the next one. I think it's going to go 7, but right now I'm leaning to. I said Cavs in 7 in our last week in our preview show. Now I'm kind of leaning toward Magic in 7. I think they're going to get. I think that they're going to be the team that breaks the road thing and steal the series. But I still think it's. I think it's going to go 7.
Yeah, I just think I'm starting to lean towards 6. I think the Magic have been way better at home this year than they have been on the road. But I just think the momentum is completely shifted in this series.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
definitely.
first 2 games, the Cavs were winning the rebounding battle, they were winning the shooting percentage battle, and defensively, in a couple of the games, they actually produced more turnovers than the Magic did. I don't see them flipping that again because they've just gotten dominated the past 2 games. I mean, it's not been competitive at all. At least game 3, they were in it at halftime, but they kept allowing 10-0 runs, 11-0 runs. It's like I have a hard time believing that they're going to head back to Cleveland, probably with a home crowd that's a little bit pissed off. And the second they let that 10-0 run happen, it's going to get real silent in there. Jonathan Isaacs is going to start waving at the crowd. Mo Wagner is going to start blowing kisses. Like, I don't know. I think too, like, this season, kind of the talk of the town in Cleveland has been Donovan Mitchell wants out. It's been kind of a quiet undertone of the season. Like, most people kind of assume that he wants out, but for a while the rumor was they wanted to go to the Knicks, and that doesn't quite make sense anymore. It's just the way that they've been playing, it almost seems like they're kind of given up. I think too, if we're leaning towards the Magic, I thought this was an interesting little tidbit. Out of teams in the East, the Magic have actually been really good against the Celtics in the regular season. They match up really, really well. They have all the perimeter defenders to kind of, throw bodies at Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. And actually, they're 3-3 against the Celtics in the past 2 seasons, and in their past 2 years of matchups. Pretty similar teams across those couple of years. So
that's what I love about Orlando is their perimeter defense. So many of those guys could really get after it on the perimeter. I think where you can hurt them is they really don't have a rim protector. Wagner and Carter are just not rim protectors. But nobody, really takes advantage of that. Another thing I want to say is Evan Mobley. This is second straight year he's really been invisible in the playoffs.
I mean, really, like, even Garland has had a bad series.
Yeah,
he had a good game 1, and it wasn't like a blow you away game 1. Like, he was just shooting the ball well.
Right.
But I mean, the past 3 games, even he's been single digit scoring in a couple of games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can look at Donovan Mitchell too. I mean, he's been under 20 in all but 1 game.
And when you
That's
think
crazy.
when you think of the advantage that Cleveland should have is offensively, they have more players who can create their own offense, and they also have some nice, knockdown shooters in Strus. LeVert can create his own shot. Garland certainly can. Mitchell certainly can. But that's getting shut down by people like Suggs and Isaac and guys like that.
Yeah. I think something that's also hurt the Cavs so far, Dean Wade went out for the season, and he's kind of one of there are few bench guys that really brings like a big burst of energy off the bench. And this is a team that definitely can look kind of sleepwalky at times. I like to call them Uncle Fluffy. Like, every once in a while, like, Uncle Fluffy just shows up to the game and, they forget how to pass. They forget how to shoot. They can't rebound. The defense looks like ass. And, that Uncle Fluffy showed up the past 2 games. And, you could even argue they didn't play that well in the first 2 games. It was really just the Magic, or a pretty young team. Banchero's just kind of now finding his footing in the series. Wagner's kind of had a down year, Franz Wagner, that is, and
Right.
he had a great game
Well, at
4.
least in terms
So-
of shooting from
Yeah.
outside. Yeah.
Yeah. But game 4, he really got it going. Yeah, I worry, with all of the perimeter defense, and just the sheer amount of length and size that the Magic can throw, at guys like Garland and Mitchell, it creates a lot of matchup problems on offense. And then when you switch sides and you look at, defensively, when the Magic have both Wagner's, Jonathan Isaacs, and Banchero on the floor with a guard, somebody's gonna get an easy matchup against one of the Cavs guards, which is that's going to create a little bit more offense for the Magic than maybe they would normally get. But yeah, looks like Doc's joining us.
Yes.
So Doc, you got any Cleveland Magic takes?
Good series on both teams. Did what they had to do. I don't know. Just that you got to see. I had to see how the first team to win when they're away. That's how you can really tell. When both teams playing good at home, then if the trend continues, then the home team going to win the series. So guess I'll just wait to see how the Magic play Game 5.
Yeah,
I think
Cam
we're on
and
the same page
Cam
there.
and I are of the opinion that Orlando's kind of figured it out, and that Cam thinks they're going to Orlando in 6. I said Orlando in 7. I think they're going to figure a way to win one of those road games. I just think it's a bad matchup for Cleveland, and people like Mobley isn't showing up, and Mitchell's not showing up, Garland's not showing up, and I think a lot of that has to do with Orlando's defense.
Yeah, like I say, it's a good series. That makes sense. But it's just hard for me to tell how. I like to see how the team play on the road. Like even today with a different matchup with the Sixers and Knicks. Like I like to see how the team play on the road, and can you get a win on the road? That's what really matters. So
True.
Right. One of the other series that I picked out, and it actually looks like today it maybe got a little less interesting, but I think there's some other implications that might come out of the series that are going to have some real big effects on maybe the rest of the league and certainly the Milwaukee Bucks. But right now the Bucks are down 2-1 to the Pacers in the 3-6 matchup in the Eastern Conference. We've seen playoff Dame kind of carry this team a couple of games. Last night it was actually Middleton that really brought the heat for the Pacers or for the Bucks.
Yeah.
But today it came out that Dame Lillard actually aggravated what was earlier reported, I noticed, to be an ankle injury, just generally. But it turns out he's actually strained his Achilles. He's been ruled out for Game 4 against the Pacers. And of course, too, Giannis is still recovering from his calf injury and is also going to be listed as out for Game 4. The one thing that I've really noticed in this series is Siakam has been awesome. I think he's been a really huge reason, a big addition, obviously, for the Pacers this year. But in the series, he's actually been averaging 30 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and he actually only has 1 turnover in the entire series.
Wow.
So way positive on that assist to turnover ratio for the series. Man, I just think, I'm curious what you guys think, but man, without Lillard, without the Freak, I just don't see any way that the Bucks are going to be able to hold on and really just push this series later. But I mean, maybe the one bright side has been Chris Middleton. I don't know, Doc. What are you thinking about the series, man? I'm really curious to see, like, can the Bucks fight back for long enough to get their stars back and healthy?
yeah, it's tough. They had that game when it went to like double overtime. The recent game I watched that game, Chris Middleton was doing his thing. Damian Lillard was already hurt at that point. He was going to be like a decoy. I don't think they can because they can't stop Siakam. He goes to it's hard to stop guys. I always say in the playoffs, it's hard to stop guys that couldn't go to the basket. That's why I always felt like if Zion had a chance to play in the playoffs, he'd be a problem. But guys that could always go to the basket and play physical, and you can't stop them, those are the guys that give you like a hard time, and they can't stop him. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to hold off enough. I mean, they don't have that same Heat culture. This is maybe like the Miami Heat culture, and they spirited and they could fight. I would think so, but I just don't. I don't see it. I think when the Pacers have a guy like Siakam, if Siakam wasn't there, then maybe yeah. But now, I think it's too much. I just think it's too much for them to handle without they 2 stars.
Yeah, I just Milwaukee just doesn't have the depth. I mean, they're playing AJ Green. I mean, AJ Green. I mean, this is a guy, undrafted. He doesn't. He's really a G League player, but that's the guys they're forced to go with. They just don't have the depth that Milwaukee does. I will say they have been fighting, but yeah, I just don't know where the offense. And I also have been really impressed. Middleton, at least the other night, he looked like Chris Middleton 5 years ago. Before all his injuries and stuff. So I was happy for him. But Siakam, man, he's been deadly, especially from mid-range. Whew. I mean, he's just going down there and he gets around, 12 feet, right around the elbow and just knock him down. And they're, a lot of times they're just letting him make them. They're giving him those shots. And he's been highly efficient. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, it's tough too though, because we really got to see a glimpse of playoff Dame. It's the Bucks really looked like they were peaking at the right time in a lot of ways in the first couple games. Granted they lost that game too, but to get Chris Middleton back to even like a fraction of what he was in their championship run, and then Dame's up over 30 points as well for the series. Just to have Dame go down in game 3 it's a tough look for the Bucks. What do you guys think though? Like what, maybe it's a little too early to talk about their off season, but I think it's heading in that direction. They're all in on this team.
Yeah.
And they're pretty limited on options to improve.
Very much like Phoenix.
Yeah, a lot like Phoenix. They're maybe not as handicapped as Phoenix is right now in terms of picks. They don't have a lot left. But what do you guys think they need this summer? Is there one position that they really need to fill? I thought it was, kind of silly that they had even gone with Campaign earlier in the year. I was like, that's just not a guy that they need. I much prefer the fit of Pat Bev, with the team, but obviously they need depth, but what is like the one guy that they should maybe pursue this year?
I don't know what the Bucks need to do. They did what they had to do by getting their 2 stars. Their culture was having Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. Those they glue guys. They're a team that I don't think they're one piece away. They just need to play better basketball together. That's why I say some teams don't. Some teams like them, they're not really one piece away. You got your 2 stars, and then you got Chris Middleton's still good as a third person, but even if you get another guy that could score a little bit, but I don't know, their team doesn't need, it isn't nothing that to me that glares out about the Milwaukee Bucks, is that they just don't play basketball the right way. They could have kept their first coach instead of getting rid of him, and maybe they would play better. I feel like it's just coaching a lot be what teams need, and I think that's what they need is better coaching and play better basketball together. And I think that's where that's the problem they lie. And I think that's a big problem. Same thing with the Lakers. We talk about a lot of days. Sometimes it's better coaching. It's not really the team. Sometimes you can have everything, and the coach don't be there.
You look over Milwaukee's roster. They have so many old guys, so many guys that are on the downside, including Middleton. I don't know.
It's nobody. Yeah, it's nobody in free agent. It's not. There's no ones who you could really say, okay, it's going to make their team better. Which you could say for them to get younger, if anything. But like I said, sometimes it's just be about play style and coaching. I don't know their style. I don't know when I watch them play. I don't know. Okay, this is what I need to watch out for. A lot of things just be ISO ball, and hopefully one of the guys get to it. So
I think
that's why it matters to have coaching, and coaching matters.
I think too that the new CBA is going to kick in. They're going to have they're going to be handicapped in terms of signing free agents. So it's almost like who's going to be the trade guy? You know, I mean, Lopez looks pretty creaky as well. You know, if we're going into even their role player base is getting old as well. I think he had 1 rebound, I think, in game 3, either game 3 or game 2, which is insane. I mean, he's a 7-footer, 1 rebound, damn near 40 minutes of play. Crazy. I'm excited to see what their summer looks like.
And with their few draft picks, right now they haven't really hit with them. Now, admittedly, Andre Jackson's a rookie. Bechamp's still really young. So, but those guys are hardly playing. And so they were, and they also picked 2 guys that were really athletic but more defensive oriented. I mean, if you just look at the starting lineup, obviously shooting guard's the thing to stand, or guard. You could say guard because you could use Dame as your shooting guard and maybe get a point guard. But how are you gonna do that? What are you gonna trade? I mean, Bobby Portis and Lopez or Middleton, I suppose, would be the 3 guys you could trade. But can you afford to lose those guys? Not really, no.
I think probably the guy that I think it's going to come down to one of the bigs. Like they're going to have to choose between them. You know, I think Bobby Portis has always kind of been a luxury for them. They have Giannis and Lopez. It's like they don't need another big.
The fans will hate it though if he's the one.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, so maybe then it ends up being Lopez. You know, maybe they can't get a whole lot for him, but
what kind of
clear up the space?
What kind of point guard are you going to get for him? You know?
Yeah. Yep. All right. I had to throw this last series in here just because I peeped a little bit of news that came out today. Prior to maybe about 20 minutes ago, I wasn't too worried about the series. I thought it was going to continue to be competitive. But I'm talking about the Clippers and the Mavs, the 4-5 matchup in the West. Right now the Mavs are up 2-1. They've got a game in Dallas coming up this evening. And actually, after game 3, Kawhi, he had played hurt. He's been dealing with some knee soreness, some swelling, really since the end of the regular season. He missed the last 8 games of the year. But, he had said post-game that he was going to play if he could go. And then actually today, the president of the Clippers, Lawrence Frank, came out and actually ruled him out for game 4 of the series. The Mavs have, I wouldn't say one going away in the last 2 games of the series, but they've kind of been stealing the Clippers candy a little bit, just, getting those last little 4th quarter leads and holding on for dear life. First game was pretty sluggish for the Mavs, and Kawhi's been good. I mean, he hasn't been great. We haven't seen past levels of playoff Kawhi, but what are we thinking with this series? Without Kawhi, can the Clippers, come out, take care of business, and even up the series?
Yeah, you know how I feel about this conversation. Clippers is still going to win the series. I'm not scared. Don't believe in Dallas. I watched those game 2 and game 3. Yeah, Dallas is going to find ways when you got Luka, but this is the same team. They was up 2-0 versus them before. They had game 3. They was up by 20 and they lost the series. So it's not Clippers got their number. I still trust the Clippers, and I think they do play today. I don't know what time they play, but yeah,
it's tonight. It's tonight, I believe. Oh no, it's actually I think it's starting right now, or getting close to starting. This afternoon.
I got the Clippers winning that. I just don't. I think even without Kawhi, they not scared. They don't put fear in their hearts. So yeah, I still got the Clippers winning. That's just how I feel about it. I don't like Dallas. I never did. I don't like teams that don't play defense. I don't like teams that that Luka just thinks he's a point guard, and I keep telling people he's not a point guard. He's just a guy who usage rate is high, who's going to get assists too. And I don't think you can win basketball like that. So I think Clippers got enough to beat them. I think they play today. They're going to tie it up, go back to LA, and win another game, go up 3-2.
Yeah, I got to disagree. I don't think Kawhi's had a huge impact on this series. But Dallas is home today. So I kind of like them to go up 3-1. And it's just, yeah. Am I rolling the Clippers out? No, because as I said, I don't think Kawhi is like a deal breaker, you know. But I do think Dallas has improved defensively. I don't think they're, you know, I think they've worked hard, you know, to do that beside, you know, getting Kawhi. But, you know, when you look at guys like, you know, the two centers, Gafford and Lively, you know, they're really good rim protectors. PJ Washington's a solid defender. Derek Jones is a solid defender. So Exum is a solid defender.
Really solid.
So, yeah, I think Dallas has got this series.
Yeah, I will say I did see that Gafford is also questionable.
Oh, that's right.
I think that makes a big difference. You know, maybe tonight if he can't go. You know, Lively's been good, but he's still pretty limited. You know, I mean, outside of, you know, lobs, that's really about all he can bring on that offensive
that's all he did
side.
do.
Yeah.
Eventually that'll change. You know, he's like 20 years old, but yeah.
Right.
Actually, the game is on right now, and the Clippers is winning 42-20.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big lead.
Wow. That's craziness.
You know if Gafford's playing, Doc? It looks like they didn't start Gafford. No, they started him. Yeah, so he is playing.
All right. Well, Doc looks like Doc got this one. You know, obviously still first half, right? So still could. We've seen a lot of swings in when these teams play.
It's only in the second quarter.
Right. So that's pretty still up in the air, but it's looking good for Doc.
One thing you guys are definitely right about was that, well, I don't know if you said it too, Rich, but I know Cam said it about that Minnesota series. I can't believe they up 3-0 right now.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of options either. I mean, but, you know, they kind of looked lifeless. You know, I mean, they really haven't been very competitive at all.
At all. It makes no sense to me.
Well,
it's just their roster construction's ass outside of the stars.
Right.
I mean, like forcing Booker's turnovers have been crazy this series. And it's because they're making him play point guard.
Yeah.
Like, why they're just running him down, having him bring the ball up, and they're just pressuring him at half court.
Right.
He's coughing it up.
I
think that's a big part of it.
I think smart teams these days, you know, get a point guard and they don't have their stars. They don't have their scorers, their main scorers be their point guard. Maybe those guys might have the ability to do it, you know, to run, but it's just too much. And I think you need a guy who can facilitate, play some D. How about Mike Conley? I'm so happy for him.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He's been awesome.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to the mailbag. We haven't had the mailbag in a while, but we got a couple of questions this week. Of course, when we talk the NBA, usually that's when the questions come. People are more willing to talk about the NBA. Also, I'm going to start reading off people's last names when I get them, because I'm figuring that's probably half the reason why they write, because they want to hear their name on the podcast. So our first question today really isn't a question. It's more like JT Smith is kind of yelling at us. He says, OKC is the best run organization, ? And then he says, what about Denver? And then he says, and SGA is only 25, not 28 or 29. Come on, man. So the SGA part is we said that he was older than he was. Yeah, our mistake, our bad. And I definitely said OKC was the best run organization in the NBA, and JT, you're right. Denver is the best run organization in the NBA, and that's just proven by the fact that they got the results. Now OKC, might take, has the capability of taking over. I mean, I think they're both very well run organizations, but right now you probably have to give the crown to Denver until OKC makes some serious playoff damage. What do you guys think?
And I'll give it to OKC personally. I just think, if you're asking like who's the best run organization, I mean this Denver roster was really made by Conley. Like our current, Calvin Booth is our current GM,
Right.
president of operations. I mean, really all he's had to do is keep the team intact, and even then they've had a lot of guys leave.
Right.
So I don't know if I would say that makes them the best run organization. I mean, even down to Jokic. I mean, yeah, they picked him, but he was a flyer pick. It just so happened that he turned into this MVP caliber player. So I think what OKC has done, in terms of like the organizational aspect of like, we're going to acquire as many picks as we can. We're going to spend those picks on a type of player that fits the way that we want to play, which they've stuck to, to a T. They only really take a certain type of guy. And two, I mean, they've managed to keep SGA happy on a rebuilding team. Even more, like they've built a team that really likes to play with each other. You can see that. They've been barking in all of their interviews. Like it's a bunch of young guys that are real competitive. Real happy to play the game. Improve with each other. I think it's cool to see. But I would say OKC is the best run, personally.
Okay. Doc, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely pick OKC. Just they've been doing this for years. I mean, it's not just a temporary thing. They haven't won a championship, but they found a way. They had 3 superstars and recovered from that. They still good. Like that, teams don't really go through that. The way you could lose 3 superstars and 1 MVPs before 2 don't with your team, and then they have a whole new generation of young stars coming in. So yeah, you definitely got to pick OKC. I think that's no brainer.
Okay, all right.
And same organization that has drafted 3 MVPs in the past 20 years. That's pretty busted.
Yeah. So thank you, JT, for correcting us on SGA's age and interesting debate there. Our next question, I don't know any names here. This was via Twitter. We were asked from Basketball Visionaries, which I think is part of they have their own podcast, but for some reason we got asked. Brandon Ingram for LaMelo Ball. Who says no?
Pelicans.
I agree.
I just think.
Well, I think Charlotte says no. Actually,
oh,
go ahead. Let's hear what you have to say.
I don't know. To me, I mean, if I'm a Pelicans, I like the upside potential there with LaMelo and how he could fit with Zion, but why am I trying to grab another guy who's injury prone?
Well, they're both injury prone.
I mean, Ingram is too. I mean, but I'm gonna pair LaMelo Ball with Zion, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if LaMelo's actually played fewer games than Zion has.
Yeah, good point.
I'm not taking that shot personally. I would rather get a veteran that's been around a little bit longer if I'm trading Ingram personally. And also too, I think they would be more likely to find a guy like that.
I just think Charlotte, what are they going to do with Ingram? They already got a guy like him and Brandon Miller.
They got Brandon Miller.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, and Ingram to me he's another playoff burnout. He just doesn't show up I just don't think he's as good as his draft slot. I think at least LaMelo could be as good as his draft spot if he could ever stay healthy. But we've seen with all the ball boys, their bodies just aren't durable. I hope that changes because they're really fun to watch. Yeah, I don't think this trade really works for either of them. You know, if New Orleans had a player who their star player wasn't very injury prone, then maybe you do take a chance on LaMelo. You know what I'm saying? But that's not the case. So you could be going, you know, for huge portions of the season or huge portions if you make it to the playoffs without your two best players.
Yeah, I'm not taking that shot.
Who's
a team that I think
I do think New Orleans has to do something about Ingram though.
Oh yeah. I think he's out for sure. But I'm like I'm just trying to think of the teams that are like, yeah, let's go get Brandon Ingram. It's if there's one team that wants Ingram, it's got to be the Chicago Bulls. That's just a team that's like, oh, 20 a game. Let's go get him. like that's kind of what Ingram is. It's just like, okay, you know, when he's really good, it looks awesome. He'll sell you some tickets, but I just don't see it.
But when you actually put somebody, the fact that he can be shut down 1-on-1 in this series is scary. It's scary, and it says to me, you're useless. You're useless. They don't even have to double you.
Yeah. Well, and two is like he and Zion, in a lot of ways, when I watch the Pelicans, he and Zion's backups are better than them in some ways. Like I like the Pelicans when they have Herb Jones and Trey Murphy on the court.
I love Herb Jones and Trey Murphy.
They play a higher pace, it seems like. They move the ball more. They have a little bit more shooting. Like that's the thing with Ingram. Like he's a good shooter, but he's really a one-on-one scorer.
Right.
Like he's not that great in spot up.
He's a one-on-one scorer who can't score against good defenders.
Yeah, too skinny. I don't. They have to move off of him. They have to choose between him and Zion. I don't think they can manage both of them. I don't think they fit very well with each other. And I just think, you know, even in the play-in, we saw, you know, the ceiling of what Zion can do is going to be better than, you know, even just like a healthy season of Ingram. You know, they're better off kind of doing the Embiid thing where it's like, let's just gamble and hope that he's healthy in the playoffs next year.
Right.
And that'll set us up, you know. So, yeah, I think Ingram's out for sure, but not for LaMelo Ball. That ain't happening.
Right. Any other thoughts, Doc?
Not really. I don't. Yeah, I think Brandon Ingram is. You gotta make a move. I think he's out. Charlotte. It's gonna be hard for Charlotte to even want to give up LaMelo. I think they will want to keep him for right now. This is because it's like a what if. But
right.
I think and LaMelo's still young. I mean, I think they'll take that more. They're not ready to get rid of LaMelo just yet. So I think they're gonna trade him. They're gonna want to trade him for another young star. To them, that's their star. So I think they're gonna be reluctant just to trade him for like an Ingram or anybody like that.
Right.
Oh, let me give you one. Brandon Ingram for Julius Randle. Who says no?
I think I'd do that.
Zion says no because Zion wants to be a Knick.
Yeah, you just be too jealous.
I think if anyone said, I don't know, that sounds pretty good to me.
Also, I would love to watch Tibbs get rid of Randall just to get stuck with Brandon Ingram. Quickest way to give that dude a heart attack.
All right. Any final thoughts on the playoffs, Doc?
Like I said, I was shocked about when Minnesota are out 3-1, and I'm still mad for the Milwaukee Bucks having to have injuries like that, going out like that first round.
Yeah.
But hey, the pathway's open now for a lot of teams in the East to make their first Eastern Conference Finals now.
Indeed.
Like, yeah, it's like the Boston Invitational, though. You're gonna lose a Boston, but hey, at least you made it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right, so we'll wrap it up today. As always, I want to thank our listeners, and I want to thank our special guest, Coach James Jones, for joining us. I also want to thank Cam for he's been extremely helpful to me while my wife has been ill, and now I need surgery, which happens tomorrow. And Cam has done what he could to help keep things running, and I really appreciate that. So thank you, Cam. Also want to thank Doc for joining us. It's nice to have Doc back with us on a weekly basis. So if you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. Also, if you'd like to send a question to the mailbag, please email it to admin, ADMIN, at hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions via social media on Twitter at hoopsprospects, on Instagram at the Hoops Prospects, and on Facebook at Hoops Pros. And thank you guys for the questions this week. We will be back next week, and we'll be talking more NBA playoffs, and we'll also be diving into the draft prospects that are in the G League, that played in the G League this year, and some of those guys are going to be pretty high in the draft. Definitely some first rounders there. So yeah, and we'll also have another college notebook and keep you up to date on what's going on in the portal and transfers and stuff like that. Any final words, gentlemen?
No. Gotta give one quick shout out to Candace Parker. She announced she's retiring from the WNBA today. Gotta pay respect to the GOAT.
Yeah, I love Candace. Very well. Wish me luck tomorrow.
Good luck.
Yeah, man. Good luck, Rich.
I will need it. This is not. This is spinal surgery. Kind of scary, I must admit. All right.
It's gonna work out.
I hope
Not
so.
too worried.
I hope so. I'm also worried they're going to make me shorter, because they're fusing some of my vertebrae together. I can't afford to get shorter. All right, folks. We'll see you next week.